The Iranian parliament has approved closure of the Hormuz Strait. Now, that could potentially block access to oil routes.
In reaction to the turmoil in the Middle East, and investors do fear that Iran would disrupt what is global shipping via the Strait of Hormuz.
Picture the jugular vein of the global economy. It's not a stock exchange or a data center. It's a narrow channel of water, at one point only 21 miles wide, that separates Iran from the Arabian Peninsula. This is the Strait of Hormuz. Through this single choke point flows 1/5 of the entire world's daily oil supply, plus a massive volume of natural gas. The prosperity of entire nations, the price you pay at the pump, the cost of almost every product you buy, all of it is tied to the safe passage of supertankers through this strip of water. For decades, this strategic passage has been a flashpoint for geopolitical tension. But the events of the last few weeks have pushed it from a state of chronic unease to the absolute brink of a crisis. Following unprecedented U.S. strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities in June 2025,
the U.S. directly bombed Iranian nuclear facilities. NBC's Alice Barr explains what triggered the strike and the risks ahead.
Tehran didn't just retaliate with words. It retaliated with missiles, striking a U.S. airbase in Qatar.
The United States has launched a series of targeted airstrikes, citing imminent threats from Tehran's nuclear program.
And now, the biggest threat of all is back on the table: a full closure of the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranian parliament has already voted in favor of it. If they follow through, it would be an act of economic war against the entire world. So the question isn't academic anymore. It's immediate and it's urgent. Is the world's oil supply about to be held hostage? Section 1. The world's most important choke point. To really get the gravity of this moment, you first have to understand the geography. Just look at a map of the Middle East. The Persian Gulf is bordered by some of the world's biggest oil and gas producers: Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, Iraq, and of course, Iran. All of these nations depend on a single exit to get their product to the global market. And that exit is the Strait of Hormuz. It's the only way out to the Gulf of Oman, and from there, the open ocean. For thousands of ships a year, there is simply no other way. The shipping lanes themselves are incredibly narrow, just 3 kilometers wide in each direction. Every single day, about 20 million barrels of oil are loaded onto tankers that navigate through the strait. And that's not just a number. That represents the energy that powers the huge industrial economies of Asia. In 2024, it was estimated that 84% of the crude oil and 83% of the liquefied natural gas that passed through Hormuz went to Asian markets. Countries like China, India, Japan, and South Korea are completely dependent on this one waterway for their energy security. This geography has created a permanent state of tension. On the northern coast, you have Iran. On the southern coast, Oman and the UAE, key allies of the United States. And always present in these waters is the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet, based just across the Gulf in Bahrain, with the job of ensuring the free flow of commerce. This puts two sworn enemies, the U.S. and Iran, in dangerously close quarters, inside a space that is critical to the entire global economy. This isn't new. Tensions have flared here for decades. During the Iran-Iraq War in the 80s, both sides attacked commercial shipping in what became known as the Tanker War. In 2019, tankers were damaged by what the U.S. said were Iranian mines.
With attacks on 2 oil tankers in the Gulf of Oman, the U.S. blamed Iran and will raise the issue in a United Nations Security Council meeting.
The threat has always been there, simmering. But the direct military strikes between the U.S. and Iran in June 2025 have changed the game completely. The simmer has become a boil.
Well, the world is, of course, bracing for Iran's response to the United States attacking its key nuclear sites, with Tehran.
Section 2. The spark and the escalation. This crisis didn't just appear out of thin air. It was born from a rapid and dramatic escalation. It started with U.S. military strikes against 3 key Iranian nuclear facilities, an action taken alongside Israel that crossed a major red line for Tehran. Iran vowed to retaliate, and it did, swiftly. Missiles launched from Iran slammed into the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, the largest U.S. military installation in the Middle East and the forward headquarters of U.S. Central Command. While a fragile ceasefire is now in place, the situation is incredibly volatile. Both sides are on high alert. Right after the U.S. strikes, Iran's parliament made a provocative move. They voted to approve a plan to close the Strait of Hormuz. Now, the final decision rests with Iran's Supreme National Security Council and the Supreme Leader, but the vote itself sends a clear message. If pushed, Iran is willing to use its most powerful economic weapon. But is it just a bluff? Can Iran actually close the strait? The answer is found in Iran's military strategy, which is built on something called asymmetric warfare. Iran knows it can't win a head-to-head fight with the US Navy. Its Navy is ranked 37th in the world. So instead, it has spent decades preparing to turn an enemy's strength into a weakness. This strategy has a few key parts. First, a huge arsenal of anti-ship missiles hidden along its coast and on strategic islands. Second, a fleet of submarines, including midget subs that are very hard to detect in the shallow waters of the Gulf, perfect for laying mines or launching surprise attacks. Third, they have two navies, the regular Iranian Navy and the Navy of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGCN. The IRGCN specializes in unconventional tactics, like using swarms of thousands of heavily armed speedboats for hit-and-run attacks. And finally, Iran has a massive stockpile of naval mines that could be secretly deployed across the shipping lanes. The goal wouldn't be to sink the entire US Fifth Fleet. The goal would be to make the strait so dangerous, so risky, that shipping companies would refuse to send their ships and insurers would refuse to cover them. Iran doesn't need to win a war to close the strait. It just needs to create enough chaos to make it unusable. Section 3. The global economic fallout. A closure of the Strait of Hormuz, even for a short time, would trigger an immediate and catastrophic global economic crisis. The first domino to fall would be the price of oil. Within hours, energy markets would panic. Analysts predict the price of crude oil could surge from current levels to $120 or even $130 a barrel. Some forecasts are as high as $150. An increase that sharp would send shockwaves through every part of the global economy. For you and me, it would mean an instant and painful spike in gas prices. But it goes so much further than that. Oil is a key ingredient in everything from plastics to medicine. It's the fuel for the container ships and cargo planes that are the backbone of world trade. A massive price hike would drive up the cost of making and moving almost every single product. This would fuel inflation, crush economic growth, and could easily tip the world into a severe recession. The impact on shipping would be just as bad. The mere threat of conflict has already caused freight rates to surge. A full closure would cause insurance premiums to skyrocket to a point where nobody could afford them, effectively stopping all traffic. A business leader in Pakistan reported that a single container from China that cost $1,250 before the recent tensions is now being quoted at $5,000. He called the situation devastating for business viability. Now imagine that multiplied across millions of shipments. So what about other routes? They exist, but they're a drop in the bucket. Saudi Arabia and the UAE have pipelines that bypass the strait, but their combined capacity is only about 2.6 million barrels per day. That's a fraction of the 20 million barrels that pass through Hormuz daily. There is simply no real alternative for the vast majority of the region's oil. The world built its entire energy system on the assumption that the Strait of Hormuz would always be open. That assumption is now being put to the ultimate test. This is a complex and fast-moving story, with new developments happening all the time. If you think this kind of deep dive analysis is important for understanding the forces that shape our world, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next video. Your support helps us keep making content that goes beyond the headlines. Section 4. The strategic endgame. Given how catastrophic a closure would be, you have to ask, would Iran really do it? A full, sustained blockade of the strait would be, as one US official put it, an act of economic suicide. Iran, despite its threats, also needs the strait for its own trade, especially its oil exports that go to its most important ally, China. Closing the strait would cripple Iran's own economy and tick off its few remaining friends. So if a full closure is a bad idea for everyone, what's Iran's endgame? It's likely that Tehran isn't aiming for a permanent blockade. It's aiming to use disruption as leverage. The strategy may not be to close the strait, but to show that it has the credible power to do so. By launching individual attacks, seizing a tanker here and there, or laying a few mines, Iran can keep global markets on a knife's edge. This creates volatility, drives up costs, and puts huge political pressure on the US and its allies to back down and maybe offer concessions. It's a high-stakes game of chicken where the threat itself is the real weapon. From the US side, the challenge is just as tricky. The US has up to 50,000 troops in the Middle East, with major bases in Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and the UAE. In a straight-up fight, the US military would dominate. But a war in the Strait of Hormuz would be anything but straightforward. Iran's tactics are designed to make any military action incredibly costly. Trying to clear mines while under fire or fighting off swarms of small boats in a narrow waterway would be a bloody and difficult job, even for the world's most powerful navy. This is why, despite all the tough talk, both sides are stuck in a dangerous balancing act. Iran knows a full closure would invite a devastating military response. The US knows that even a successful military operation would come at a terrible price, and might still fail to prevent a major global economic shock. This fragile balance is exactly what makes the situation so unstable. One miscalculation, one accident, or one political decision to push things too far could shatter it all and plunge the world into a crisis with consequences nobody can predict. So, is the Strait of Hormuz under threat? The answer is a clear and simple yes. It's always been a weak point in the global system, but the recent military strikes have turned a chronic risk into an acute danger. The attacks by both the US and Iran have shown that the long-running shadow war can break out into open conflict at any time. While a full, permanent closure seems unlikely because it would be so damaging to Iran itself, the threat of partial disruption is very real. Iran has the tools and the strategy to create chaos in the world's most vital energy choke point, using it as a powerful lever against the United States. Even without a total shutdown, random attacks and the constant threat of mines are enough to send costs soaring and terrify an already fragile global economy. In the end, this crisis is a stark reminder of just how interconnected and fragile our world really is. The complex web of trade and energy that we all rely on can be thrown into total disarray by events in a single, narrow stretch of water thousands of miles away. The only path forward is de-escalation and diplomacy, but with tensions at their highest point in years, the world is holding its breath, hoping that this vital economic artery doesn't get severed.